Okay,
All right, you can see me?
I can see you in your Pizza Planet shirt.
That's right. Boom. Hello, everybody, and welcome to a brand new edition, episode 3, that is, of That 70s Pod. As always, Andrew Lockhart here, and the guest of honor, the guy who was in the 70s, that's going to give us all the info that we need today. But before we get to exactly what that topic is, let's just bring him on in. Bryan Lee, here you are. How are you today?
Well, thanks for referring to me as the guest of honor. I don't know if I will be able to live up to that moniker, but I'll do my best. Talking about the 70s once again.
That is right. And today we are in 1972. Before we get to that, real quick, in 1969, a little orange ball named the Nerf ball was created. Did a little bit of research. I found interesting in 1970 that the Monkees, a band that you and I are both fond of, came up with a commercial. It was like a Kool-Aid slash Nerf ball commercial advertisement in 1970s. But in 1972, our topic today is what?
The Nerf Football. And the reason that we're talking about the Nerf Football, of all things, from the 70s, is you had presented me with a question a few days ago, I guess, Andrew, about what was a toy that was real big in the 70s, something that you really wanted. And man, I really had to think about that. And because I was into the original G.I. Joes, not the little action figures that are 4 inches, but the G.I. Joes that were more like 10 inches, 11 inches. The bigger ones. I had a collection of those back in the 70s, and whenever a new one came out, that would be what I wanted. But I didn't really want to talk about GI Joes and have people questioning my masculinity when I was growing up as a 10-year-old in the early 70s. So, um, lo and behold, I thought of the Nerf football. And like you mentioned, Andrew, the Nerf football came out in 1972. And before we get into the story behind it, I just want to say that I absolutely loved my Nerf football. I mean, it was an opportunity to go outside and play football in the snow or in the rain or whatever the case may be, and not get hurt by this thing. Living in Minnesota in the 70s, when you were playing football in the wintertime, once that ball got frozen and you got hit in the face, man, that son of a gun hurt. So Nerf football was a lot safer and a lot more fun to play with.
So I'm gonna start right up by actually jumping ahead a few decades because like there's a Nerf with the tail and then the one that bounced back at you and then the pocket vortex and the weather one. There's commercials and ads for everything. I don't know if it's just the research, but I can't find one in 1971 and or 72 that promoted the Nerf football itself. Was there even a commercial for it? Or was it like a magazine advertisement? When did you first hear about the Nerf football?
Well, there was a TV commercial for the Nerf football, and I couldn't tell you what it was about, but I had to find out about it somehow. So I watched a lot of TV in the 70s, a lot of cartoons on Saturday morning, afternoon television and reruns, Gilligan's Island, The Flintstones, all that stuff. So, absolutely, I must have seen a commercial, and I'm sure it's out there somewhere. Maybe you just weren't looking in the right spot in.
So in the 60s, the Parker brothers, along with Ren Guire, created the original Nerf ball. But in 1972, you also just mentioned that, hey, playing in Minnesota, a ball gets cold, it hurts, you can't see it at nighttime. So in 1972, what Minnesota link brought to this invention?
Well, what first of all, just to back it up a little bit, you touched on this already. That Rain Geyer came up with the Nerf ball back in the late '60s, And how it came about, Andrew, it's an interesting story. Rain Geyer is the inventor of the board game Twister. Now, everybody knows Twister, and I think Milton Bradley jumped on that one. So Geyer and his associates, after developing Twister, was working on some kind of a caveman game. And so they had these foam rocks that were part of this caveman game. Incidentally, that never came to be. But these foam rocks, these associates started throwing these rocks at each other and wound up having more fun throwing the foam rocks at each other than they were playing this game that never came to be. So they decided to market what you referred to as the first foam ball. And this was marketed as something that Milton Bradley, by the way, wasn't even interested in the foam ball, but Parker Brothers jumped on it. The foam ball was marketed as something, the first ball you could throw in the house and not break a lamp, not break a window, not hurt babies, and not hurt old people. That's what it said on the package, if you can believe that. And it sold $4 million, 4 million Nerf balls in the first year.
So I know this is a podcast, it's audio, but out of my curiosity, is that what they look like?
That's what it looked like. Now, I never actually had the Nerf ball, but I was at some church bazaar or something, and you remember those from when you were a kid, where you go fishing and you throw a line over a curtain, and then they lift a basket back over the curtain, and you get a prize. It was some deal like that. And what I got was a little basketball hoop with suction cups that you stick on a mirror or a window, and the foam ball, the Nerf ball. I don't know if it was actually a Nerf ball, but it was a facsimile. And so I played basketball with it a little bit, but I just loved having this ball and throwing it in the house. And my dad had this little billy club, so I would play baseball in the house. It wasn't a real regulation bat; it was just like a 18-inch piece of wood that looked like well, it was a club. And so I played with this thing all the time. And when the Nerf football came into being 2 years later in 1972, then I absolutely, Andrew, I had to have this Nerf football so I could play football in the house.
So just to paint a picture real quick from everybody I was just talking about, it's a little orange ball. I think it came in orange and pink, maybe lots of colors. It says Nerf on it, the world's first indoor ball that you can play with. And the catchphrase it had here, oh, I just lost it. It was something kind of Moms rejoice as the 4-inch, I don't even know that word, foam ball is playing without breaking anything. So when this was created, you didn't have the Nerf ball itself. Did you ever see anybody that had the normal Nerf ball? Because of football, you can't really squeeze it. It's very hard. It's a lot of foam put together. Was this the same as like the regular Nerf ball, or could you actually squeeze it like one of those stress balls people have nowadays?
Well, when they came out with the football, you're right, Andrew. It had a special coating on it,
Hmm.
so it wasn't like the Nerf ball. It had this special coating on it, and it's made out of a special material using chemicals, and it's called polyurethane. It's polyurethane foam,
Thank you.
and and basically what polyurethane was used for back in the early 70s, it was wrapped around these support bars that were used in off-road racing or off-road competitions to prevent damage to cars. Back in the 70s, you'd have like four-wheelers and dune buggies and whatever the case may be, where people would go off of any type of paved road or dirt road, whether they're driving on rocks or mud or sand or whatever the case may be in competitions. And so there'd be support bars to kind of direct these folks where to drive. And wrapped around these support bars was the Nerf foam. made out of this polyurethane. By the way, Nerf is actually an acronym, Andrew, for non-expanding recreational foam. I'll say that again, non-expanding recreational foam. That's where they came up with the word Nerf.
So far, not gonna lie, we're saying a lot of facts, and they're interesting facts, but we are gonna get to the root of this podcast right now. When was the first time you remember in 1972 seeing a Nerf ball? Last 2 weeks ago, we talked about a movie, but you were also a fan of boxing. Last week, we talked about a record being broken, but you were a fan of baseball. Obviously, you're a fan of football. When does the Nerf football come into your life?
Well, just a little bit of a background on that, Andrew, is I think I mentioned to you um, on one other podcast that growing up in St. Paul in the early 70s, um, I didn't live in a real great neighborhood. So um, I wasn't outside as much as I would have liked to have been, unless my big brother was out there with me. But if I was on my own, I just played ball in the house. That's why having this Nerf ball, this safe ball, was attractive to me. So once I had the Nerf ball, I would play baseball games by myself in the house and have bases and have fences for home runs and all that stuff using furniture. So when the football came along, I could do football in the house and kick field goals. Had to be careful with that though, because the football was a little bit stiffer than the Nerf ball was. And and so that was kind of the main attraction to having a Nerf football. Was it was something I could do in the house, and when my brother and I did get outside and play, it was a ball that I could catch better than a regular football. So that was the attraction in having a Nerf football.
So you mentioned you're inside, you're playing with this football. When did you get it? Was it a gift? Did you see somebody, like a friend that had it first? Like, what color was yours football? Like, I want to know everything about when you first hear and you get this Nerf football.
Well, it would have been around my birthday, and guessing I would have been about 10 years old then. And I went to a store with my mom, and I'm guessing it was probably a Walgreens or something of that nature that used to have a pretty good selection of toys, especially the latest toys back in the 70s. And and we went and we looked for this Nerf football, and they had it in a few different colors. You could get a pink one. Um, you could get, I think they maybe had green, but my mom said, "Well, what color do you want?" And so I picked the one that was sort of a dark orange or like a burnt orange. They didn't have a brown one, but I wanted something that looked as close to a real football as possible. So I picked this burnt orange color football and went home. I was so excited. I held onto it in the car on the way home and just so excited to get it home and start playing with it. And it was a firm ball. I mean, it wasn't like the Nerf ball we talked about earlier. It had that coating on it, so it was a little bit more firm. And I suppose if you threw it really hard, you could break a lamp or maybe even a window. But as long as you were careful with it, it was still safe to use in the house.
So you just said you and your mom were looking for the Nerf football. So you were aware of it. How do you first become aware of this thing?
Well, like we talked about earlier, I can't remember any of my friends having it. So it must have been something that I saw on TV. I was aware of the Nerf ball. So the commercials for the Nerf football when they hit the media in 1972 must have attracted my attention, and it was something that I wanted.
So
So
we go ahead. Go ahead.
it's the story behind it is actually rather fascinating, and it was kind of a bigger deal maybe right away in Minnesota because the Nerf football was developed in Minnesota somebody had an idea to have like these goal posts, like you see in football, um, that you could buy and move around your yard and actually kick a football and pretend to be an NFL kicker. But the person that came up with this, and his name escapes me right now, um, wanted to use a ball that was kind of heavy, so kids wouldn't be kicking the ball out of the yard, over the fence, in the street or whatever. And so he went to the kicker of the Minnesota Vikings at the time in 1972. The Vikings kicker was named Fred Cox. He kicked for the Vikings for, I think, 10 or 12 years. And this gentleman approached Fred Cox and gave him this idea and said, "I want to come up with a football so I can market this goalpost thing, selling the goalpost and the ball." Well, Fred Cox came up with the idea for the football using the Nerf ball as an idea, and it was Fred Cox, kicker for the Minnesota Vikings, that came up with the original Nerf ball. And until he died a couple of years ago, he still was receiving royalties from Parker's brother. Uh, or rather 4 times a year, he was receiving royalties for the Nerf ball because he was the inventor.
So, with that being said, was the Nerf ball kind of embraced by the NFL right away then, or did that not happen until the 80s?
I don't really recall that, Andrew, but I think the interesting thing about the Nerf ball is not even Fred Cox's teammates knew that he invented the Nerf football until years later. He was a very humble guy. He didn't tell anybody that he was the one that invented the Nerf football. And, many, many, many players didn't even know about that, even his own teammates, until years later.
Okay, so the Nerf football, you just mentioned years later. Years later in the 90s, I was in elementary school. Whenever we
Sure.
had a football unit, we would have to use a Nerf football because it was just cheaper having multiple of those. And if it was like a rainy day and one of those got wet and then like hit you in the neck, like that sucked. Like they were soaked and everything. But like, was the Nerf football like a school thing that like when you were in gym class growing up, or was it still such a like a hot toy? It was. I don't even know how to say this question really.
Well, I think I know where you're going with it. Is whenever you get a new toy, of course, you want to show your friends, you want to show your classmates, and back in elementary school, you had show and tell, of course. So, um, I think I brought my Nerf football to school one time and wound up having to protect it with my life, basically, because people were trying to take it, um, steal it, whatever. So I got it out of there and got it home at the end of the day, and that thing never left my house after that. I didn't bring it to school, um, and eventually some of my friends came up with Nerf footballs as well. I do remember one of my friends had the pink one. Um, which I thought was different. But hey, when you're 10 years old, you don't really think about anything other than sports or cartoons, I guess. So it was fine. you know,
But did
uh,
people get their own colors because it could like symbolize this is mine? Like I want the pink one because I haven't seen anybody else have the pink one and I don't want to lose it.
well, that could be. That could be. Um, Nerf the Nerf people. I don't think they came up with a pink one because they were trying to market it to girls, because Nerf didn't really start the Nerf people didn't really start marketing to girls until, oh god, maybe 20 years ago. So back in the 70s, they certainly weren't uh, caring too much about marketing it to little girls. So I'm not really sure why they made a pink one. Maybe it's what you said, just to do something different. But I wanted something that looked as close as possible to a real football, and that was the dark orange.
So was this the equivalent to kids being fans of baseball and they had a wiffle ball bat? So now the Nerf football was like the football version for kids?
Well, we lived in kind of a poor neighborhood, so there wasn't many people or many kids around with a real football. We had an old pigskin football, which you don't even see anymore. And when I say pigskin, I mean this had it was an inflated football, normal shaped football with um, sort of a skin, a hide um, that was on the ball. It wasn't like the hard plastic or the hard rubber that's on a football nowadays, the polyurethane. It's um, uh, type thing. This was an actual pigskin football. And so whenever that got wet, I mean, it got wet. I mean, you couldn't really play with it. You had to let it dry before you could go play with it again. So it was it was fun to play with the Nerf because it was always ready to go. It didn't freeze, it didn't get wet. It was just unless your dog got a hold of it, took a few bites out of it, it was always ready to go, and it was just a lot of fun to play with, and you didn't get hurt when it smashed you in the face.
Yeah, so that's kind of my point. So like baseball, people have the wiffle ball bat. Basketball, people have what you said. You got that church bazaar, the little one that you hang on the back of a door and you shoot a little orange hoop in or into the hoop. So you think that was the answer to like, hey, football fans, like football kids who are fans, kids who are fans don't have a toy. And do you think that's the reason why the Nerf football was created then? Because there wasn't a market for it?
Well, like I mentioned, this associate of Minnesota Viking kicker Fred Cox, he was trying to market this goalpost where kids could actually go out and kick a football between the goalposts and pretend to be an NFL kicker, because that's what you did when you were a kid. You'd either pass the ball and be Roger Staubach or Fran Tarkington or whoever was a popular quarterback in the early '70s, Johnny Unitas, John Brody. Um, and then there was also people who just wanted to be a kicker. That's what I always wanted to be when I was a little kid. I wanted to be an NFL kicker. So this was right up my alley. And I never saw those goalposts marketed. I don't think they ever were. So I would just go to a chain link fence, and you have the bars of a chain link fence are about 4 feet apart, and I would just kick the football between um, those 4 foot posts, and that would be my goalpost. So, it was just great fun having this Nerf football. I mean, you could really do some fun things with.
Did it come with a kick and tee back then?
They did not, but for some reason we had a kicking tee in the house. Probably went with that pigskin football I was talking about. So we had a kicking tee that I could set up the Nerf ball and just go ahead and kick it as far as I could.
Do you remember how much it cost when it first came out in 1972?
I do not, but I did do some research last night just to see if anything similar is still around. I don't think the actual Nerf ball can be found anymore,
Mm.
unless somebody has a good deal on eBay or something. But I read that probably the closest thing that is on the market right now is something called the Turbo Junior, and I've seen the Turbo Junior. It's about $7 at a Walmart, and that's probably the closest thing, Andrew, to the original Nerf football from 1972.
So again, I'm showing him a picture. Is that what you saw, the Nerf Junior?
Yes,
Okay,
yes, it's
so
called the Turbo Junior,
the Turbo
and
Junior, it's the one I'm looking at is orange and black. But were the original Nerf footballs were they just one solid color?
they were one solid color, and they were kind of textured like a regular football. And you can see
Mm.
at the photo you're looking at there, Andrew, the Turbo Junior has sort of that texture look to it, like a real NFL football.
Like the little bumps on it and all?
Yeah, yeah, exactly, and that's how the original was to be a facsimile of the NFL football, which none of us had anyway back in the early '70s.
Okay, and so I'm gonna do this one more time. I know it's not a visual thing. I also do encourage people to look up look up Nerf footballs because you're probably used to like the one color on top, one color on the bottom, or the one with the flat, the one with the tail. This is, I think, maybe the one you had. It says original Parker Brothers Nerf. It has a little fun bubble font that says Nerf. Is that the Nerf football you had?
That is it, Andrew. Yes, where it said it actually says Nerf on the side of the ball, and
Hmm.
it looks like there's laces on the top.
Yep.
I don't know if they do that anymore or not, but
Oh, they got
yeah,
peeled.
when Minnesota kicker Fred Cox developed this Nerf football using the polyurethane, they actually had, I don't know where they came up with it, but they had a mold that they used of an actual NFL football. So the Nerf football, it wasn't reduced in size or anything. It was the size of an actual NFL football.
Hmm.
So
Again, back when I was in the 90s, we had a football unit, and I always grabbed this one. It looks like Miami Dolphins color, teal on top, orange at the bottom. I remember that playing with that as a kid for like a gym unit and all. So I'm gonna stop. I'm gonna stop with questions. I'm gonna stop with facts. I just want to listen right now. Any stories? Any? You've told some stories of playing inside, kicking over the fence. Just give me a bunch of Nerf football stories. Like I want to hear more about you as a kid in the 70s with your go-to football toy.
well, the story that I thought of, Andrew, the reason that this all came to be when you asked me what toy was huge in the '70s that I wanted, is I was such a nerd in the early '70s, Andrew, that when I first started following the NFL, we already know I was a baseball fan. Um, when I started watching the NFL, I thought it would be fun. I would watch a whole game, being 10 years old, I would watch a whole NFL game with a pen and paper, and I would write down all the scoring from start to finish. I don't even know how I figured that out. I must have seen a box score in a sports section of the St. Paul Pioneer Press or something. I don't know, but I would write down like at the time the Vikings had Fran Tarkington as a quarterback, and I would write down Fran Tarkington throws to whoever one of his receivers were, Gene Washington, for a 45-yard touchdown pass. The kick was good, and if the other team scored, I'd write that down, and and I would do that for the whole game. I'd write down all the scoring. I would write down the scores by quarter and the final score. And I did that for the whole season, Andrew. I was such a nerd, doing this, writing it down for every single game. And then when the season was over, guess what I would do with my Nerf football? I would reenact every single game of the NFL season for the Vikings anyway that I had written down. I'd go back to game one, and there's Fran Tarkington throwing his 45-yard touchdown pass to Gene Washington. Here comes Fred Cox. Oh, he kicks the extra point. And I would reenact the whole game in the house, mind you. Playing football, I would pretend I was the running back and get tackled. I would just fall, and sometimes I'd fall on the couch if I wanted to make a really spectacular fall, or I would just tough it out and fall on my backside or my knees or whatever, and and I would just have a ball, is not literally, but I would just have great fun. There we go, reenacting the entire NFL season for the Vikings in 1972 that I had written down play by play, and then after the season was over, reenacted the whole thing with my Nerf football in the house, and I can still remember doing that, and like I said, kind of a sheltered kid, but I could entertain myself, and I just had a lot of fun with that Nerf football.
It sounds like it. It definitely sounds like it. So within Is there any other facts? Obviously, the Nerf football has a near dear place in your heart. Is there any other facts or stories you would like to share about the Nerf football slash 1970s with anybody today?
Well, I can remember one sad day when I apparently left we had a dog um, that we kept in the basement, um, and I apparently left. I mean, it was a furnished basement. Um, we or I apparently had left my Nerf football downstairs, and the dog got a hold of it and actually chewed off one end of my Nerf football, so it didn't have the point anymore. It was just a chomp. It basically looked like you took a bite out of an apple. That's what it looked like. He just, took off the end of my football, and God, I was so upset. And it was my own fault for leaving it down there. But it was just a sad day that this dog took a chomp out of my Nerf football. I love my football, and I was not happy with the dog that day. Um, Other than that, my brother and I had good times out in the backyard playing with the Nerf football. Um, since it was just the two of us, we didn't really try to tackle each other or anything like that. My brother was always the quarterback. He liked Joe Cap, Viking quarterback in 1969, and so he would have to throw the ball, and I would have to run and catch it and pretend to be a Viking receiver, because we were Viking fans, and that's what we did. So we had great times playing with the Nerf football. Didn't have to worry about breaking windows or anything, and yeah, it was just a good time. A Nerf football was I think one of the highlights of the '70s as far as toys are concerned. And in fact, Andrew, I almost forgot to mention this. Time magazine listed Nerf football as one of the top 100 toys of all time. There you go. Nerf football was a great way to be a kid and grow up in the '70s.
It was number one.
It was in the top 100 toys of all time.
Oh, okay, top 100.
Top 100, yes. It
And
could have been 99. It could have been 99, but it at least made the top 100.
And real quick, backtracking, we mentioned the pink football, and then you're like, oh, they didn't market towards girls. Was Barbie's like the go-to toy for the girls back then? Like always?
Um, as long as I can remember, yeah, Barbie was pretty much um, the most marketable toy. If you're going to see a commercial on TV,
Okay.
it's usually going to be about a Barbie. Yes,
Okay.
it's, but I didn't really pay attention to to what little girl toys were. I'm sorry.
So, is there any other facts or info when you were doing your research that you just found interesting that you want to add that you haven't mentioned that you really want to get in?
Not really. I thought the most interesting thing that I already mentioned was that the kicker of the Vikings invented this thing, and his own teammates didn't know about it for quite a few years later.
Did you know about it?
No, no, nobody. He was a quiet guy.
Hmm.
He didn't really blow his own horn. After football, he became a chiropractor. Um, so he was always concerned about safety issues, and like I told you, the guy that his associate that wanted to market these goalposts wanted to use a heavier football, and he didn't think that'd be safe for kids kicking a heavier ball and hurting their leg, so he came up with the Nerf football kind of because of that reason. Is he didn't want anybody to get hurt. He was concerned about safety. And it's just fascinating to go back and do research on how some of these things came to be. But Minnesota kicker Fred Cox, uh, who is no longer with us, but he made more money on royalties from Parker's brothers with the Nerf football than he ever made playing NFL professional football.
And when it comes to kids playing with football and with toys, he definitely did it justice with create with this creation. And I hope we did Nerf football justice today with this episode. That's everything I have for episode 3, 1972. It's the Nerf football. Brian, you have any last words about Nerf football today for us?
No, it's just, you always help me come up with a topic. The few weeks ago we did Rocky in '76, and then you got me thinking about Hank Aaron in '74, and then you asked me to come up with a toy, and we're kind of going backwards every 2 years here. So next week we might talk about 1970. Who knows? So no, it's been great fun, and hope it's been entertaining for you, Andrew, and the people out there that are tuning in.
Definitely. I didn't know about the whole Fred Cox thing. Right away, I was like, oh, is that why he picked Nerf football? Because it's a Minnesota Viking. So I'm always finding out something new. And hearing stories when you were younger is interesting for me. Back in the 70s. And that's why we talk about it here on That 70s Pod, which you can find on SoundCloud. You can find on YouTube, uploaded every rather Saturday or Sunday night. And next week, I have an idea, but we're not even 100% sure what it's going to be about. To wrap up episode 3, 1972, Brian, lead us out.
All right. Thanks for listening, Andrew. Thanks for hosting, and we'll see you next week.
That's a big old peace. Yep, that's our catchphrase. Peace.
Peace, my friends.
Hey, this is Andrew Lockhart here. I'm just going to say this quick because I say it every single week. We all love snacking, but sometimes our snacking can make us feel a little bit guilty. This is the first snack that is guilt-free, and it's the king of snacking. That's why it's called King Line Nutrition. They have plenty of stuff on the menu, but they're really known for their edible cookie dough. Or you can actually roll it up and ball it and put it in the oven to make cookies. Halloween flavors, Fruity Pebbles, Cookie Monster, chocolate chip, anything you can think of that's an ice cream, a cookie, a candy bar, a pie, they have it in a flavor. Great thing about this is it's vegan, egg free, dairy free, peanut free, depending on which flavor you get, because there is like a Reese's peanut butter cup flavor. But most importantly for me, gluten free, because I eat gluten free and it's hard to find desserts that are gluten free. If you want to try this, try it today with the discount I'm going to give you right now. It's my last name, Lockhart, 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 for 15% off, and that's at kinglinenutrition.com. Try it today.